U.S. Open, and if things go great, that's exciting, and if not, I go back and I work hard and I get ready for the next one, and that's kind of...
This particular head-to-head has been tough for you. Slowly but surely, you're turning the tide now. 2 matches in a row, 2 wins against Ego. What has changed?
Welcome back to my channel, where we do not just watch matches, we peel back the layers and expose the drama that everyone else is afraid to touch. And today you need to sit tight, because what I am about to break down is shaking the very core of the Australian Open and professional tennis itself. We have all seen bad calls, we have all seen arguments with umpires and emotional meltdowns on court, but we have almost never seen what happened after. The Coco Gauff versus Elina Svitolina quarterfinal. Because this time the story did not end with a final handshake, it exploded afterward in a way nobody expected. What first looked like just another painful loss for the young American has now turned into a full-scale officiating scandal that has the tennis world on edge and questioning everything they thought they knew about fairness at the highest level of the sport. If you watched that quarterfinal live, you probably remember the visible frustration on Coco Gauff's face, the long looks toward the chair, the disbelief after certain points, and at the time most people brushed it off as nerves, pressure, or the intensity of a Grand Slam quarterfinal. But now, with the benefit of hindsight and a shocking public confession, those moments take on an entirely different meaning, because the man sitting in the chair, the official entrusted with protecting the integrity of that match, has now admitted he failed, and not in a small way, but in a way that may have altered the entire outcome of the contest. In an almost unheard-of move in professional tennis, the chair umpire from that match has stepped forward with a public apology directed squarely at Coco Gauff and her supporters, acknowledging that his decisions were wrong, and that those mistakes came at critical momentum-shifting moments. This was not a casual acknowledgement or a vague statement about human error. This was a clear admission that a series of officiating calls went against Gauff, and that those calls played a role in how the match unfolded. Let that sink in for a moment, because players complain all the time, fans complain every day, but officials almost never concede fault, especially at a Grand Slam on one of the biggest stages in the sport. According to the umpire himself, he reviewed the match footage after the fact, going through it frame by frame, and what he saw disturbed him enough to speak out publicly. He acknowledged that several decisions he made under pressure were incorrect, and that those errors directly affected the flow, confidence, and momentum of the match for Gauff. Imagine training your entire life, sacrificing everything, grinding through early rounds at a major tournament, only to later hear that the person enforcing the rules admits he got it wrong when it mattered most. That kind of vindication does not feel like victory, it feels hollow, because the result is already locked in history, and nothing can rewind that night under the lights. Naturally, you might think an apology would calm things down, that it would bring some closure, but in reality it has done the exact opposite, because instead of closing the book, this admission has ripped it wide open. Fans are furious, analysts are dissecting every frame, and the tennis internet is in complete meltdown. The Coco squad has rejected the apology outright, and their argument is simple: sorry does not restore a lost opportunity, it does not return ranking points, prize money, or the chance to play a semi-final at one of the 4 biggest tournaments in the world. Words do not undo damage, especially when the damage is permanent. Behind the scenes, the reaction has been even more intense. Reports indicate that Coco Gauff's management team, along with tournament officials, are preparing a formal complaint to the WTA, and this is not a routine request for clarification. They are demanding a full-scale investigation with no corners cut, no quiet resolutions, and no sweeping things under the rug. They want accountability and consequences, because if this is allowed to pass with nothing more than a public apology, it sets a terrifying precedent for the future of the sport. The central question they are asking is one that makes everyone uncomfortable. Was this simply incompetence under pressure, or was there something deeper at play? The investigation they are pushing for is meant to examine not just one match, but the broader systems that allowed such errors to occur at such a critical moment, and they are reportedly seeking real penalties, including potential suspensions or fines for the official involved. Because in their view, this stopped being about one bad day the moment the umpire admitted fault. This controversy forces tennis fans to confront a harsh reality: if officiating mistakes can decide the outcome of a Grand Slam quarterfinal, and then be acknowledged only after the damage is done, what does that say about the integrity of the competition moving forward? What does it mean for players who trust the system to protect them during the most important moments of their careers? Coco Gauff is not a fringe player, she is a US Open champion, one of the faces of the sport, and if this can happen to her, it can happen to anyone. As more details began to surface, it became clear that this was not about one isolated call. Sources close to the unfolding review suggest that multiple moments during the match raised serious red flags, moments where decisions went against Gauff at points when momentum was hanging by a thread, and those moments slowly chipped away at her rhythm, confidence, and emotional balance, the kind of invisible damage that never shows up on the scoreboard but defines matches at the elite level. The sense of injustice is amplified by the timing of the umpire's confession. Critics are asking why now, why not immediately after the match, why wait until footage was analyzed, and public pressure began to mount. Some believe the apology was a strategic move, an attempt to get ahead of an inevitable investigation and present himself as remorseful before disciplinary action could be taken. Others argue that his conscience simply could not carry the weight of what he saw on replay regardless of motive. The effect is the same. The credibility of the match has been compromised, and the Australian Open is once again facing uncomfortable scrutiny. What makes this even more explosive is that this incident has reignited a long-standing debate within tennis about how much authority human officials should have in an era dominated by technology. Hawk-eye automated line calling and high-definition replay systems exist precisely to eliminate these kinds of errors, yet chair umpires still wield enormous power over time violations, code violations, and the overall flow of a match, and when those decisions go wrong, the consequences can be irreversible. For many fans and former players, this scandal feels like the breaking point, proof that the sport has outgrown its traditional reliance on human judgment at critical moments, and that reform is no longer optional but necessary, because when a Grand Slam quarterfinal ends with an apology instead of clarity, something fundamental has gone wrong, and this story is only just beginning. To fully understand why this situation has detonated the way it has, we need to zoom in on the exact moments that turned a competitive quarterfinal into a controversy that may define this Australian Open, because according to sources familiar with the internal review, there were at least 3 critical incidents during the match where officiating decisions were not just questionable but potentially match-altering, and when you stack those moments together, the picture becomes deeply troubling. The first flashpoint came during a high-pressure service game in the second set when Coco Gauff was serving to stay alive, a point that carried enormous weight both mentally and strategically. During that game, a ball that appeared clearly long by several inches was called in, handing Elina Svitolina a free and crucial point. Gauff immediately reacted, challenging the call with visible disbelief, but due to a reported technical malfunction, the Hawk-eye system could not produce a definitive replay. The chair umpire chose to stand by the original call, and in that instant everything shifted because Svitolina seized the momentum, broke serve, and suddenly the entire complexion of the set changed. Momentum in tennis is fragile. It is built point by point, breath by breath, and when a player feels wronged at a pivotal moment, the emotional toll can be devastating. Gauff, who had been composed and aggressive up to that stage, suddenly looked unsettled, and that single call snowballed into a cascade of doubt that no statistics sheet will ever capture. The second incident arrived in the deciding set during a long grinding rally, the kind that defines Grand Slam tennis. Gauff ripped a shot down the line, one she believed was a clean winner, and from her vantage point it looked perfect. The chair umpire immediately ruled it out, without allowing her the chance to challenge a decision that would later prove disastrous, because television replays showed the ball kissing the line by the thinnest margin. That point could have given Gauff a crucial break opportunity. Instead, it was taken away, and with it went another piece of her confidence. Svitolina capitalized, instantly riding the wave of confusion and pulling ahead, while Gauff was left trying to mentally reset after what she believed was a stolen moment. Then came the third and arguably most damaging decision of the night, a time violation warning issued to Gauff at the worst possible moment as she prepared to serve during a pivotal game. Late in the third set, the umpire ruled that she had exceeded the allowed time between points, but subsequent video analysis showed that the timing was well within the rules. The warning rattled her instantly. Already frustrated by earlier calls, she tightened up, and on the very next point she double faulted, handing over momentum yet again. That incorrect warning directly preceded a service break that effectively sealed the match, and this is one of the errors the umpire has now openly acknowledged. When viewed individually, any one of these moments might be dismissed as unfortunate, but together they form a pattern, and patterns are what investigations are built on. This is why Gauff's team is pushing so aggressively behind the scenes, because they believe this was not a random sequence of mistakes, but a breakdown of officiating standards at the worst possible time. The timing of the umpire's public apology has only intensified scrutiny because many believe it came too late, and for the wrong reason. Skeptics argue that once WTA officials, analysts, and former players began reviewing the footage, it became clear that questions were unavoidable, and by stepping forward first, the umpire may have been attempting to control the narrative before disciplinary action was taken. Others believe the psychological weight of seeing his own mistakes laid bare on replay forced him to speak regardless of the motive. The result has been the same, a firestorm that refuses to die down. Beyond this single match, the scandal has reopened a much larger debate about the role of technology versus human judgment in modern tennis. For years, the sport has slowly moved toward automated line calling in an effort to remove bias, fatigue, and error, yet chair umpires still retain immense authority over non-reviewable decisions, including time violations, code violations, and match flow, and this case has given powerful ammunition to those who argue that the human element has become the weakest link. Supporters of expanded automation argue that technology does not feel pressure, it does not get tired, and it does not carry subconscious bias. They believe more decisions should be reviewable and fewer left to subjective interpretation, especially at Grand Slam events where careers, legacies, and millions of dollars are on the line. They see this incident as proof that reform is overdue. On the other side, traditionalists push back hard, insisting that tennis without human officials would lose part of its soul. They argue that umpires, like players, are human and mistakes are inevitable. The key, they say, is not eliminating officials, but strengthening review systems and accountability measures. They point out that over the course of a season, calls tend to balance out, and that nearly every player, including Gauff, has benefited from favorable decisions at some point in their career. But that argument falls flat for many fans when the mistake happens on a stage this big, because a first-round error at a minor tournament does not carry the same weight as a quarterfinal at the Australian Open. The ranking points, prize money, exposure, and historical significance are exponentially higher, and for a young star like Gauff, who is still building her Grand Slam legacy, every opportunity is priceless. The reaction from the tennis community has been swift and sharply divided. Former players, commentators, and analysts have taken to television studios and social media to weigh in. Some have voiced deep sympathy for Gauff, sharing their own experiences of matches where officiating decisions haunted them for years. They speak of the helplessness of knowing a call was wrong, but having no power to change it, and the mental challenge of regaining focus after feeling robbed. Those voices are calling for structural change to ensure that matches are decided by players, not officiating errors. Others have urged caution and perspective, reminding fans that Svitolina played an excellent match and deserves credit for her performance. They argue that tennis outcomes cannot be reduced to single moments, and that it is impossible to say with certainty that Gauff would have won had those calls gone differently. Momentum, psychology, and execution all intertwine, and to strip Svitolina of her achievement would be unfair, especially given her own journey back to elite tennis amid personal and geopolitical challenges. That nuance, however, has been largely drowned out online, where social media has turned into a battleground. Clips of the controversial calls have gone viral, slowed down, dissected, and debated frame by frame. Hashtags demanding justice for Gauff have trended worldwide, while others accuse fans of conspiracy thinking. The discourse has grown so heated that several prominent tennis journalists have publicly called for restraint, warning that the toxicity risks overshadowing the tournament itself and damaging the sport's image. Meanwhile, the silence from WTA leadership has been deafening, but it cannot last much longer, with a formal complaint reportedly filed and pressure mounting from fans, players, and sponsors. The organization faces a defining moment, because how it responds now will send a message about what it values more: protecting its officials or protecting the integrity of competition, and the answer to that question could shape the future of professional tennis. As the tennis world waits for an official response, the pressure on the WTA continues to intensify, because this is no longer just a controversy about one umpire or one match. It has become a referendum on how the sport governs itself at the highest level, and whether players can truly trust the system when everything is on the line. The WTA now finds itself trapped between two equally dangerous paths. On one side, they must maintain the authority and confidence of their officiating corps, because umpires cannot function effectively if every decision is followed by fear of public humiliation and punishment. On the other side, they must reassure players and fans that blatant errors, especially those admitted after the fact, will not be ignored or quietly brushed aside. Sources inside the organization have suggested that an internal review is already underway, even though no public statement has been released yet. That silence has only fueled speculation. Will the umpire be quietly removed from future Grand Slam assignments? Will there be a temporary suspension or mandatory retraining? Or will this all end with a carefully worded statement about lessons learned and moving forward? Any of these outcomes will draw criticism, because there is no solution that satisfies everyone, and that is precisely what makes this moment so pivotal for the sport. What complicates matters further is the structure of tennis officiating itself. Chair umpires are certified by the International Tennis Federation and work across ATP, WTA, and ITF events, which means any disciplinary action taken by the WTA would require coordination across multiple governing bodies, adding layers of bureaucracy, politics, and conflicting interests to an already volatile situation. There are also legitimate questions about due process. Does the umpire deserve a formal opportunity to defend himself before penalties are imposed? And what if he argues that some errors were influenced by factors outside his control, such as technical failures, sightline issues, or inadequate technological support? As attention turns inward, the spotlight has also fallen on how tennis officials are trained, evaluated, and monitored. Becoming a Grand Slam chair umpire requires years of experience, extensive rule knowledge, and the ability to perform under extraordinary pressure. With millions watching, these officials are supposed to represent the gold standard of the profession, and yet this incident has exposed cracks that many believe have been ignored for too long. Critics are now calling for more rigorous post-match evaluations, similar to systems used in other major sports, where referees are graded and those grades directly affect future assignments. Supporters of reform argue that accountability should not begin and end with catastrophic mistakes. They believe patterns of smaller errors should also matter because over time those patterns can influence careers. They point to sports like football where officials are constantly assessed and poor performance has real consequences. The question is whether tennis is willing to adopt a similar approach or whether it fears that increased scrutiny would make umpires overly cautious, hesitant, and unable to control matches decisively. Another proposal gaining momentum is the expansion of the challenge and review system. Currently, players can challenge line calls, but they have no recourse for time violations, net cord calls, or other discretionary decisions. Many argue that the technology already exists to review nearly any aspect of a match in real time, and that players should be allowed limited challenges for any disputed ruling. Opponents of this idea warn that such a system could slow matches to a crawl, disrupting rhythm and undermining the flow that makes tennis so compelling. But after this incident, the trade-off feels increasingly acceptable to many fans. While administrators debate systems and procedures, Coco Gauff herself has taken a remarkably measured public stance. In her immediate post-match comments, she expressed disappointment with some calls but stopped short of placing blame on the umpire. She acknowledged that Svitolina played well and emphasized that she needed to execute better in key moments. This response earned widespread praise, reinforcing her reputation as one of the most mature and composed young stars in the sport. Privately, however, the story is very different. Sources close to Gauff indicate that she and her team are furious and determined to ensure that this situation leads to meaningful change. They are acutely aware of the politics of professional tennis and understand that public outrage from players often leads to fines and subtle retaliation, which is why their strategy has focused on formal complaints, evidence preservation, and quiet pressure rather than explosive statements. Gauff's representatives are reportedly documenting everything, not just from this match, but from other instances this season where they believe officiating inconsistencies have affected her. This approach reflects the reality of power dynamics in tennis. Players who openly challenge officials too aggressively can quickly earn reputations that follow them from court to court. Gauff is savvy enough to know that her long-term career depends on navigating this moment carefully, even as her fan base wages war on social media on her behalf. The stakes are especially high given where Gauff stands in her career. She is already a Grand Slam champion and one of the most marketable athletes in the sport, but she is still in the phase of building consistency and legacy, proving that her US Open title was not a one-time breakthrough, but the foundation of a dominant era. Deep runs at majors matter enormously at this stage. Every quarterfinal, semifinal, and final appearance shapes how history will remember her, and that is why losing a quarterfinal under these circumstances feels so devastating. From Svitolina's perspective, the situation is equally delicate. She has wisely chosen to remain silent, avoiding any comment on the umpire's apology or the controversy surrounding it. Engaging would offer her no benefit. Defending the umpire would risk appearing dismissive of Gauff's grievances, while acknowledging errors could undermine her own victory. The smartest move is to focus on her tennis and let the administrators deal with the fallout. Yet, even if she goes on to win the Australian Open, some fans will inevitably attach an asterisk to her run, which is deeply unfair, but also unavoidable once the integrity of a match is publicly questioned. This is the collateral damage of officiating failures at elite events. They do not just affect one player, they cast a shadow over everyone involved, and once that doubt enters the conversation, it is almost impossible to erase. As speculation continues, questions swirl. Will the umpire officiate another match at this tournament? Will he be sidelined quietly, or will the WTA make a public example to restore trust? Sponsors, fans, and broadcasters are all watching closely because credibility is the lifeblood of professional sport, and once fans believe outcomes are compromised, the entire product suffers. Ultimately, this controversy may become a turning point. Either it will fade into the long list of scandals that briefly dominate headlines before being forgotten, or it will force tennis to confront uncomfortable truths about officiating, power, accountability, and the balance between human judgment and technology. For Coco Gauff, the result will never change. The quarterfinal is gone, and the opportunity lost, but what happens next could shape the experience of every player who steps onto a Grand Slam court in the future. And that is why this story refuses to die, because it is not really about one match. It is about who controls the narrative of fairness in modern tennis, and whether the sport is brave enough to evolve when its flaws are laid bare.